So we're looking at space filling. Well, let's go start with skeletal and then space filling notation for both 12 and 16 subdivision patterns. So do you want to start with 12 or 16? 12. Okay. So 12s, basically what we're looking at is an overall beat structure that would look like this. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, and if they were all full of beats or attacks, it would look like this. So it's 12, 8. Right, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. So we can just call this beat 1, 2, 3, 4, or number these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. Hi, gentlemen. Okay. So let's pick one of the. Actually, do we have row, row, row your boat? No, we didn't. Let's do row, row, row your boat, since that's not one of them, but it is a 12 beat pattern. So if we had row, row, row your boat, right? And so I'm just sort of lengthening out all the syllables, but figuring out where they sit on each of these. So row, row, row your boat, gently down the stream. Okay. So we have row. Actually, why don't you guys throw it? I'll throw it to you guys. So row. Where's the second row? 4. Next row. 7. Your. And then boat is 10.
That's the surface rhythm, right?
Sorry? That's the surface rhythm right here. Yeah. Row, row, row your boat. The underlying rhythm is this flow pattern, which we call well, it's just the underlying feel of pulses or subdivisions that you have. So, and I like to think of it as when I'm walking, you know, if I'm going at a certain tempo, I'll feel like, you know, I'll feel, you know, sets of 3s, or if I'm like, you know, at the gym. So usually I'm, you know, feeling 2s if I'm going fast enough, or, you know, if I'm walking 4s. So you pay attention to, like, as you're walking at different tempos, you might find that you have sort of a feeling of rhythm underlying your, you have subdivisions that you'll probably start thinking of without even knowing it. Okay, so here we have our row, row, row your boat. Well, let's just go row, row your boat. So if we were doing this as a skeletal, our underlying subdivision is 8th notes. So all we're going to do is show 8th notes, and then the rest of them are just going to be rests. So we're just showing the attacks, the beginnings of each note. So it's like as though we were doing a staccato. Row, 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 row. Just the beginnings. Later, the space filling is row, row, row your boat. We're filling out all the space. Okay. So here, these will all be 8th notes. Okay. And we'll fill in the intervening space with rests. So 2 8th rests for this, 2 8th rests for this, 8th rest in here. And there you go, that's your skeletal. Now, sometimes, because it looks a little bit, when you're looking at music in 12/8 or 6/8, sometimes it gets a little confusing because there's lots of, you know, you're not seeing the groupings. So sometimes in notation, they'll actually space them out a little bit, so you have each set of 3 with a little bit of extra space. But you can also sort of imagine them as being, that's what I put the lines under over there for, is just sort of group them as 3s. Row, row, row your boat. Like that. Okay? Now the next part is we're going to lengthen these out. And notice I'm using 8th rests all the way through here. I mean, this could be a quarter rest, but I'm going to go with the convention. And this is a notation convention where if a rest comes at the beginning of a beat, it's okay to put a longer rest. But if it's coming at the end, it's better to fill in all the individual small bits. Now, when we get into larger things like sets of 4s, what we do is divide those halves into eighths. And so you finish the first 8th with a 16th, and then the second 8th with an 8th, rather than doing this. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just, rather than having that, it's a bit confusing to read that. It's better to have the rests that fill out the space. Okay. And also here, we wouldn't do this. We wouldn't put an 8th rest or a quarter rest here because it's just a bit awkward. It's just a convention they've come to. They don't do that really. buy a brush, as I was saying, I think earlier. I'm using... Okay, does that make sense though for skeletal?
Yeah. Wait, so for skeletal you would use like where each word is and then
Where each word is and just the beginning of the word. Now, if you were doing like the program I was using on Logic, what it does is it allows you to put in just little blocks for each of those little bits of sound, right? So if you've ever done GarageBand like that, it sort of divides it up into 12 little boxes, and you can fill each box with a little with a little note, and that will start it off. Okay, and then what we're going to do with space filling is just sort of build each note until it reaches the next note that's there. So just extending them out like that and see how long those notes are. So in this sense, if you want to actually get counting a little bit, you can say, well, this one is 1, 2, 3 pulses long, this one's 3, this one's 2, this one's 1, this one's 3. Okay, and they all pretty much divide cleanly into beats. There's not a lot of ties you'd have to use, in fact, none right now, but we'll talk about ties as well afterwards. So here, space filling. So our first one, we've got a 3. This is a 3 beat note, so we can, or a 3 subdivision note. So dotted quarter there. Next one, 1, 2, 3, another one. And next one is a 2, so that's a quarter, and an eighth, and then another dotted quarter. Okay, and again, here's our 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, oops, dot. Okay, and that's 12/8 space filling.
So it would depend on the time signature.
Yeah, so the way we're doing it is it's either going to be, if it's 12, then it's 12/8, and if it's 16, then it's 4/4.
Okay. It's always 4/4, always 4/4.
For this activity we're doing just right now. I mean, not all songs are going to be in
Right.
like that, but I've tried to figure out ones that are either one or the other. Okay. Do we need to do?
16.
Let's do a 16 one just for to be safe. Okay. So this one actually, it's going to look a little bit awkward because we're going to be using a whole lot of the subdivision, which is 16th notes, right? So this is 12. Let's do 16. And so the beat is quarter notes. Okay. And those we can divide up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, let's pick one. Hush, little baby. We didn't do that one. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. So, hush, little baby, don't say a word. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Okay. So where's our hush? 1. Okay. Where's our little?
5. 3.
Hush, 3 and 4. Hush, little. Yes. 3 and 4. We'll just put notes with stems for now. We'll figure out what they actually are. A, B, 7, 5 and 7. Don't. 1, 9. Say 11 and 12 actually. Won't say And word is on 13. Okay. So all of these, we're going to put them all in as 16th notes. So, hush, little, baby, don't say. Sounds like a threat. Anyway, so and then in between, we're just going to put in 16th rests. Now here, we could do this. That would be complete, right? So here's our beat. Hush, hush, little baby, don't say a word. Okay. Now, what you can now do is start cleaning it up a little bit. And so we can put this one as as an eighth rest. And if it's within the same beat and they're right next to each other, let's also put these in as together like that. So we can start beaming things a little bit, clean them up. All right, so bum, 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 bum. All right, that's skeletal. If you left them as with flags, that's also okay. Incidentally, a lot of vocal music keeps them as flags, whereas instrumental music will tend to write them out as. So if you've read choral music, you're probably used to seeing lots of flags and flags and flags. I find it very confusing because I'm not a vocal person. But anyway, there you go. So there's skeletal. Okay, and space filling.
So you just extend the notes to fill grass.
Yep. All right, so we'll just consider this. This is a 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 4. So there's an eighth and 2 sixteenths. And here also we're going to now try to beam them together. So every set of 4, we're going to try and have a beam over it as much as we can. And so it'll be like that. 2 eighth notes. It's a beam across. If they were, you might end up with a 1 and a 4. That would be a dotted eighth, 16th. Okay, so if you had this pattern, 1 and 4, then that would be, put in just a little extra bit there and a dot.
So the space filling is kind of the rhythm of the text. Is that true?
The space filling, well, they're both the rhythm of the text, really. I mean, that's the text you're reading, right? So, hush, hush, little baby, don't say a word. This is equivalent. So all we're doing here is just saying when does each note start,
Right.
as though it were staccato, and this is if we were lengthening all of them out and filling all the space that was available. So there's no room for rests here because there's no room for resting. It's just all the available spaces. Okay. The only time you will have a rest in space filling is if it happens, at the beginning. So if for some reason you had one that started like that, because there's no note for it to be coming from.
And Mr. Saki, how do you know, Fatma had a good question, in 12 you use eighth notes and in 16 you use 16th notes. What is the rule for that, or how do you know?
We're just using those as our 2 models. So, and that's typical if you're grouping things in 4s. I mean, all of these things could be at different times and different eras. They've used different conventions for notation. Way back, they might have used a whole note for each beat, and quarter notes for what we're using as 16th notes. Now the convention is if it's a fairly fast note, those are 16th notes. The beat, boom, boom, dugga, 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 dugga. So we're dividing. If it's in sets of 4s, it's into 16th notes, and if it's in sets of 3s, we'll call them 8th notes. You could go one level further and say, well, let's make those groups of 3 16th notes instead, and you just have to change all your values to make that work. Or you could lengthen it out and make them groups of quarter notes, and then that would be dotted half notes for each beat.
Okay.
I think that's probably enough to get you started, but if anybody wants to talk about specific, questions like that, you can also stay around a little bit.
Alright, thank you.
Okay, I hope that helps.
Thank you.
So, by the way, just so you see then, each of these, this is 1 bar here, so if you can pick the first 2 bars of your given nursery rhymes, 1 in 12 and 1 in 16.
So we have to do 2.
2 bars.
2 different nursery rhymes,
And
2 bars each. Try and pick one if you can that doesn't repeat. The 2 bars are not, a lot of them do. Ba ba black sheep, have you any wool? Yes, sir, that's sort of the same. Twinkle twinkle is a little bit easy, but if you want to just ease off on yourself, you could do that one. You know what? Don't worry about it. If it happens to repeat, it repeats. It's okay.
Well, nursery rhymes tend to.
A lot of nursery rhymes tend to repeat.
And that's why the nursery rhymes are used.
Okay, thank you.